Today we are going to discuss about monetary policy, fiscal policy, and new economic policy. First, we should discuss monetary policy. What is monetary policy? Monetary policy is a set of tools used by a national central bank to control the overall money supply and promote economic growth and employ strategies such as revising interest rate and checking bank reserve requirements. And monetary policy usually defined as central bank policy pertaining to control the availability, cost and use of money and credit with the help of monetary measurement in order to achieve specific goals. Then objectives of monetary policy. First is neutrality of money. Monetary authority is the country should aim at complete neutrality of money and vice versa the economy. The ex- exponent of neutral money hold the view that monetary changes are the root cause of all economic fluctuation. In fact, it is the monetary changes which cause the operation of trade cycle. Besides, these monetary changes also cause distortion of disturbance in the operation of the economic system of the country, and the core changes in such economic entity like price, output, and employment. And the changes in money supply also cause imbalance between demand and supply, production and consumption in the economy. Then our next point is price stabilization. A policy of price stabilization carefully implemented by the monetary authority will render the trade cycle inoperative. It will render the economy free of all cyclical functions which causes so much harm to the economy, and this objective will also help to promote business activity in the economy as well. As is well known, economic uncertainty is the greatest sound economy of sound business. With frequent price fluctuation, the progress of business activity is bound to suffer a serious setback, and at least there shall be little possibility of businessmen entering into forward contract with each other with frequent changes in the price structure. Then next point is exchange rate stability. Maintenance of stable exchange rate is an essential condition for the creation of international confidence and promotion of smooth international trade on the largest scale possible. And instability in exchange rate might lead to undesirable effects such as weakening the value of currency in the world market. Then full employment. Full employment is considered as foremost and ideal objective of monetary policy, and this full employment is achieved where saving is equal to the investment, and there are many jobs as there are persons seeking them, and employment will be provided to all the members of the society, and economic resources will be utilized most efficiently. And under the condition of full employment, underemployment and half employment are also getting alternative employments, and they are utilizing their time fully well, and it doesn't mean that certain person are overemployed. Then next point is economic growth. Economic growth relates to physical or real output. It means the growth involves quantitative and qualitative production of goods so as to satisfy the consumers. In brief, economic growth implies a substantial increase in per capita output or real national income, and it doesn't mean more money in economic growth. It is not, but a real production that makes a nation economically advanced, and economic growth ultimately aims to total welfare and masses. And it can be achieved through equitable distribution of income between different social classes and individuals. These are the objectives of monetary policy. Then next is instrument of monetary policy. There are two types of instrument. One is general instrument and selective instrument. In general instrument, we are going to discuss about these types of general instrument, that is bank rate, open market option, variation in the reserve requirements, repo rate, liquidity adjustment facility. Then our first point is bank rate. The bank rate, also known as the discount rate, is the oldest instrument of monetary policy. And bank rate is the rate at which RBI discount, or more accurately rediscounts eligible bills. In a broader sense, it refers to the minimum rate at which central banks provide financial accommodation to commercial banks in the discharge of its function as the lender of the last resort. The bank rate policy seeks to affect both the cost and availability of credit. Then our next is open market option. Open market option refers broadly to purchase and sales by RBI of a variety of assets such as foreign exchange, open market options, foreign exchange, gold, government securities, and even company share. And under this open market operation, the central banks seek to influence the economy either by increasing money supply or by decreasing the money supply. The next point is variation in the reserve requirement. The Reserve Bank also used this method, that is variable reserve requirements, to control credit in India. By changing the ratio, the Reserve Bank seeks to influence the credit creation power of commercial bank, like cash reserve ratio and statutory liquidity ratio. Next is repo rate or reserve repo rate. Repo rate and reserve repo rate. So whenever the bank have any shortage of funds, they can borrow it from RBI. Repo rate is the rate at which banks borrow rupees from RBI, and a, a reduction in the repo rate will help banks to get money at a cheaper rate. When the repo rate increases, the borrowing from RBI becomes more expensive, and the reserve repo rate, discuss about repo rate, and next is reserve repo rate. Reserve repo rate is the rate at which Reserve Bank of India borrows money from banks, and banks are always happy to lend money to RBI since their money are in safe hand with a good interest. And an increase in reserve repo rates can cause the banks to transfer more funds to RBI due to attractive interest rate. It can be cause money to be drawn out of the banking system. Then next is liquidity adjustment facility. What is liquidity adjustment facility? It is a tool used in monetary policy that allows banks to borrow money through repurchase agreements. This agreement allows banks to respond the liquidity pressure, and is used by government to assure basic stability in the financial market. These are general instrument. Then selective instrument. These are a rationing of credit. Credit rationing implies controlling and regulating the purpose for which bank credit can be used, and it can be it generally provides for three things. Uh, First is an overall filling on loans and advances of every commercial bank. Then next is fixing the ratio with the capital and commercial banks would have. Then fixing ceiling for specific categories of loans and advances. The next point is margin requirement. The difference between the value of security and the amount borrowed against the security is known as margin. And the RBI is generally empowered to fix margin limit for various use of credit, which the commercial banks must observe. And margin requirement, while directly affecting the lender, also put a restraint upon the borrower and thus keep down the volume of credit by prescribing different margin requirement for different users. The central bank can divert credit to more urgent users. Then next point is variable interest rate. Variable interest rate charge selectively for different uses places or borrowers can be considered as selective as against a general dear or cheap money policy pursued through changes in the bank rate. Ceiling also provides for rate which commercial banks can charge from the borrowers for specific uses. The next point is the regulation of consumers' credit. This is often prescribed when there is either evidence or shortage of certain consumer articles. Then regulation includes permitting credit for the purchase of certain consumer articles, then extending or limiting the time for a repayment, or by lowering or raising the limit of down payment to meet the situation of depression on recession on the one hand and inflation on the other. Then next point is licensing. The RBI ensured proper regional coverage through licensing. So this incidentally it is sought the cause of selectivity in regional development. Then fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is defined as a policy under which the government uses the instrument of taxes on public spending and public borrowing to achieve various objectives of economic policy. Simply put, it is the policy of government spending and taxation to achieve sustainable growth. And it is an instrument of modern public finance. Then features of fiscal policy. First feature is rational, rationalization of product classification code. A very welcome change what brought about the administrative convenience is the adoption of the rationalized standard product code structure for indirect tax, and changes has resulted in reduced dispute about product classification. Then common accounting year for income tax. Taxation policy has adopted standard accounting year, that is 1st April to 31st March. And for the purpose of income tax, the change is intended to reduce the malpractice and raise the tax revenues. Then long-term fiscal policy. Since 1986 budget, the government of India has introduced long-term fiscal policy to provide greater certainty in, in its budgetary policy and improve the overall environment of the business. Then, impact of rural employment. Generation of employment has been an important objective of fiscal policy, and government of India has introduced new employment scheme like Jawahar Rozgar Yojana or strengthen the existing scheme like Integrated Rural Development Program or National Rural Employment Program. Then next is black money. Unaccounted money has been a contrast feature of India's economy. Fiscal measures have generally failed to reduce the creation of black money. Schemes like voluntary disclosure, barrier bonds, or Indira Vikas Patra have had marginal impact on the incidence and growth of black money. Then the reliance on uh, indirect taxes. The tax policy increasingly becoming regressive in nature by large dependence on indirect tax like excise duty, custom duty, as compared to that on direct tax like income tax, corporation tax, capital gain tax. Then inadequate public sector contribution. Con- Contrary to repeated assertion by Government of India, public sector continues to be a drain of the merger resources of the government, and planned scheme of finance have expected sizable contribution from public sector which has not materialized in most cases. And these are the features of fiscal policy. Then objectives of fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is for first objective is fiscal policy for full employment. Fiscal policy is considered as an effective instrument for reducing unemployment and securing full employment. Full employment occurs where there is job available for everyone who is fit to work and who wants a job at the prevailing wage rates. Then next point is fiscal policy and economic stabilization. Economic stability is another premium of a sound fiscal policy. This goal implies maintenance of full employment with uh, relative price stabilization. Price stability here means relative price stability. Inflation should be covered and deflation should be avoided. In short, economic growth and stability are the twin objectives jointly pursued by a developing country's fiscal policy. And the fourth stimulating growth process should be given a boost at a time while inflationary pressures are to be curbed. Then fiscal policy and economic growth. Poor countries and uh, there may be various cycle of poverty. It should be broken, and thus rapid economic growth in fundamental objective of fiscal policy. In a developing economy, fiscal policy as a means of encouraging growth process has maybe imposition on additional tax and direct fiscal control, revenue of public enterprise, increase the rate of taxation, public debt. Then Last point is fiscal policy and social justice. A welfare state should provide social justice by giving equitable distribution of income and wealth. Fiscal policy can serve as an effective means of achieving this much desired goals of socialism in development as well as developing countries. Progressive tax system can be of much use in realizing this objective. Moreover, public expenditure helps in redistributing the income from the rich to the poor section of the society. And these are the objectives of fiscal policy. Then, the role of fiscal policy. First is capital formation. Fiscal policy has played a very important role in raising the rate of capital formation in country in private as well as public sector. A major part of budgetary resources has been invested in public sector and uh, and public sector enterprise which have been resulted in increase in domestic capital formation as percentage of GDP from 10.2 to 2% in 1950 to 51 to 22.9 in 1970 to 1997 to 1998 and 23.7% in 2001 to 2002. Then next point is resource mobilization. Fiscal policy has helped to mobilize the resources through taxes, saving, public debts, etc. for economic development of the country. And resource mobilization, which was 70% in 1965 to 66, has increased to 90% in 2001 to 2002. Then next point is incentive to private sector. Private sector has been encouraged under fiscal policy for investment and production, and tax concession, cash subsidies, exemption in tax has been given as incentive to private sector units set up in backward area and export oriented units. And similarly, subsidies and tax concession have also been given to encourage imports, and as a result it has greatly affected export and import of the country. Next is encourage savings. Various incentives have been given to raise the rate of saving in household and corporate sector. To encourage saving in household sector, various concession and tax benefit have been given on fixed deposit, life insurance scheme, Kisan Vikas Patras, national saving certificates, provident fund, etc. Saving has also been encouraged in corporate sector by offering them tax concession and tax exemption. Then employment generation, poverty eradication and employment generation. To fulfill one of the one of its major objective of providing full employment, allocation of huge amount has been made in fiscal policy to eradicate poverty and generate employment. For this, a huge amount has been spent on different schemes like Prime Minister Rozgar Yojana, then Employment Assurance Scheme, encouraging small scale and cottage industry, etc. Then next point is export promotion. Export has been encouraged by the way of providing subsidies, concession tax, uh, tax exemption, cash subsidy, etc. Export have shown in rise from 4.5% in 1960 to 61 to 23.4% in 2001 to 2002. These are the roles of fiscal policy. Then, instrument of fiscal policy. First is budgetary policy. The need at such a time is to increase the flow of income stream into the economy and could be made possible only through the deficit budgeting. Hence, it is essential that the government should incur large deficit in the budget and then meet this deficit either by borrowing from the banks, etc., and through printing fresh currency note, and it will inject fresh purchasing power in the economy and helping it to fight depression and employment effectively. Then taxation policy. In order to fight depression and unemployment, taxation policy of the government should be designed as to stimulate both consumption and investment. And the only way to do it successfully is to reduce general burden of taxation on the commodity, and the commodity taxes should be cut down to the minimum so as to stimulate the consumption on the part of the public, and further to promote increased investment. It may also be essential to cut down the business and corporate tax. Then public debt. Public debt can also be employed by the government as an instrument to fight depression and unemployment and deficits in public borrowing. But while adopting the fiscal policy, public borrowing or public debt, the government shall have to keep the following two conditions. Like, firstly, in order to keep the burden of public debt low, the government should aim at a policy of low interest rate during depression. Secondly, the government should try as far as possible to borrow from those section of the commodity which whom the funds are laying idle. And the idea is to utilize those idle funds through borrowing and for productive purpose. Then next point is public expenditure. An increase in public expenditure can also be employed by the government as an instrument to fight against depression and unemployment. It can increase in public expenditure as at a time maybe two forms: pump priming, then compensatory spending. Compensatory spending. Compensatory spending refers to the government expenditure which is undertaken with a view to compensating the declining private investment, and usually private investment suddenly decline at the time of depression. Under these circumstances, there is no alternative before the government except to resort to public investment. However, public investment should be undertaken on a large scale so as to have the effective impact on the employment situation. This is all about our fiscal policy and monetary policy. Then our next point is new economic policy. India government introduced the new economic policy in 1991 as a major step towards economic reforms. And the policy was designed to reduce restriction on the economy and strengthen the India's position in the global economic scenario. And the new economic policy was launched formerly by the Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh under the leadership of P.V. Narasimha Rao, the Prime Minister of India that time. It enacted the steps to increase the economic credibility of India in the global areas. And the new economic policy of 1991, India focused on building foreign exchange reserve, removing market restriction, and increasing the exchange of goods, services, capital, human resources, and technology worldwide, thus encouraging the economic growth. Then, features of economic policy. What are the features of economic policy? The policy emphasizes the liberalization and privatization, allowing global exposure. Then, the new economic policy recommended structural reforms and measures to control inflation, and the policy focused on increasing international market competitiveness by allowing the entry of foreign companies, and policy is a reduced control and reservation by the government in different sectors and allowed more participation of private companies to help in growth and profitability. Then next point is steps taken in the new economic policy. Main are privatization, liberalization, globalization. Then privatization. The A major step was to allow private enterprises to set up industry and business in previously reserved sector and controlled by the government as public sector. The main objective was to improve the efficiency of public sector companies that were suffering losses and strengths due to underutilization of capability and resources, capacity and resources. And the measures taken under the process of privatization are selling share of public sector unit and to allow more involvement of private companies and disinvestment in public sector units that suffer loss and sell out to the private sector, and replacing most of the public sector ownership with private companies to help in industrial development and economic stability. Then liberalization. As a liberalization measures the economic policy avails the practice of getting license by the private sector for starting a new venture in India. This allows more private companies to come forward to invest the industrial sector. And the measures are free determination of interest rate by all the commercial banks, increase in the investment limit for the small scale industry for necessary upgrades, and freedom to import raw material and capital goods by Indian industries, and diversification and increase in production capacity by private companies without any government restriction. And last point is globalization. Globalization refers to conscious moves towards establishing better interaction with other countries of the world, thus making a presence in the global scenario. And globalization means the explorer and involvement in the world's economic landscape through contribution to trade, investment, production, technology, and financial matters with other countries. And the main measures are a reduction in import and export duties to attract more international investors and suppliers to the Indian market. Then implementation of long-term trade policy with reduced foreign trade restriction that encourage healthy competition between domestic and foreign products with competitive pricing. Then partial convertibility of Indian currency to the Indian currency to the currency of other countries to increase the extent of foreign investment. This is all about globalization.